Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. It's great to see so many of you here, and this is probably a lunch break, so thank you for coming along. I'm Kathleen and I'm from Kapia Consulting, and we've got Cindy Plowman here and Christy from, nervous, Conversation Caravan, and they're going to take us through a session today, which will be really great. And we've also got Eliza here helping with the tech support, so there'll be a few questions and those things in the chat box. But yeah, before we get started, I'll just take a moment to acknowledge the traditional owners from the various lands that we were meeting from today. And I'd like to pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal people and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands of Australia that we have. I'm joining from the Wurundjeri lands, and I know Christy's joining from the Boonwurrung lands. So yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge the traditional owners. In terms of today's session, if it's possible to keep your video on, that makes it easier for us to interact with each other. But it also will be recorded, so if you feel uncomfortable with your video recorded, that's understandable as well. We'll ask everyone to stay on mute as you are until there might be call outs for questions, and at that point we'll unmute then. And yeah, if you have any questions, we'll monitor the chat box as well, and we'll be using Mentimeter today for some activities, so we'll share the link through the chat box for that as well. But over to you, Cindy. I'll let you. Oh, and also, sorry, this is we're sharing all the information through the newsletters through the link that's on the screen. You may have already seen this if you've been to previous sessions, but yeah, this will be how you get kept up to date with all the information after the events. And there'll also be a Facebook page where you can go and continue the discussions after the event, because in a face-to-face session, we'd be able to go and talk to each other outside the room. But yeah, so we've got the Facebook group ready there for following the discussions after the event. Yeah, so I'll throw it over to Cindy now to get into the session. Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for having us as well. So wonderful of Kapia to put this on. I just think it's a great opportunity to come together as practitioners during this time. So again, thanks for having us. My name's Cindy. I'm the director of the Conversation Caravan, and I've got Christy Loki, who is our social media maverick, and quite handily also has a bachelor in psychology. So really useful when we're starting to talk about how we unpack the mind and use that other level of understanding that we can bring into our work. So today is really about talking you through some very practical elements of NLP and helping to shape your understanding of these other expertise that we can bring into our field that are widely used in other areas like marketing, sales, and of course, therapeutic psychology. So a little bit about why this work is so important for me. I've been a community engagement practitioner for 15 years now, and 3 years ago I was done with engagement. I felt like I just could no longer make a difference. I felt like I couldn't support the project teams that I was working with, and I felt like I wasn't making any steps with the community. You know, wasn't able to help them kind of participate in government programs. And I actually thought, that's it, I'm done. I'm going to do a career change, you know, searched the different modalities and thought, well, could I be a counsellor? Because I still wanted to be with people. You know, enrolled and did, you know, half a year in psychology, and just found them too history based. And I thought, that's not really what I want to be doing. I don't really want to be working in that deep trauma, and I don't want to be working in these kind of theories. So what I was still doing, I was still working at the time in community engagement, and it inspired me enough to start trialing and testing some of these things that I was learning in these other fields, and it allowed me to start to have some breakthroughs, both the staff that I was working with and community groups. So for me, this study is is quite linked to, my, I suppose, re-enthused passion for community engagement. And I know sometimes as practitioners, we're in the coalfield and we're struggling to make these breakthroughs. So it really helps me to bring back that joy for community engagement. And I suppose the thing for me was that I was always in these conversations where I just knew that the other person wasn't necessarily getting me, or I wasn't getting them, and there was this kind of this disconnect. And I thought, my job is communicating with people. You know, if I can't do that, then how am I doing that? How am I doing that service to the rest of the community? So that was really the kind of the pressure point for me. So for today, we're going to be experimenting with a few different things. And I know a couple of you have probably been along to an IP2 conference. I've spoken about some of these things before. Just drop in our mind, we need to just drop the need to get things right. So particularly as practitioners, we want to get things right. You're not going to get it right. We just need to keep experimenting, and you need to keep bringing that awareness to the things we're learning today. So really just permission to drop the need to get it right. I wanted to know, so we're using Mentimeter today, and would love to know that what specifically as a result of today you'd like to learn. So if you to think about what is it for you, maybe it's something similar has brought you here, frustration in having conversations or doing things better or understanding. Be a better communicator. Yeah, so communicating, it's something we do every day, and it can really be the make or break with projects, and it's essential in building that relationship. Doing things better, improving. Yeah, getting in the heads of our community members. And I tell you, this work will do that, because the moment you realise that they need what they need and you need to give them what they need is like the biggest, it's almost, it's a bit calming in a way, because there's nothing wrong with you, there's nothing wrong with them. You just have different styles, and you need to find that way of brokering that. Fantastic. Thank you. To understand how others have been managing at the time, yeah, we'll be able to get a little bit about that. And of course, we won't be able to get to everything today, but it's great to know just even things that you're interested in, because it's certainly something that I'm constantly learning and playing in, and always happy to do extra sessions. Thanks for that. So the things that I want to talk you through today, and what I feel like I can certainly deliver as an outcome, is helping you to unpack how to better communicate with people by understanding who they are, so the way they think, the way they start to process information, some personality elements which will impact on the behaviour, and then also how to shift a person's state. So like what we did when we danced in the weigh-in, we're shifting your state. So that's a very simple, easy example of moving someone from a different space. Coming in from your day, you're starting our session, we're shifting you into that state. So when communicating with someone, it's our job to say it in a way that they can understand and ensure that they get it. You know, it's different from our personal relationships where you might have that expectation that you want to be understood, but as practitioners, we're holding space for people. We're creating that opportunity for them to be involved and to be engaged. And I think that's the biggest difference from, you know, communicating with your friends and family to communicating in a workspace. So everyone thinks differently, and I'm sure you know this intuitively, but as soon as you know it kind of theoretically and you start to realise just how varied it is, for me, it's almost like a softening of my shoulders. I can actually feel myself just relax and go that there's actually more involved than what I, what I know or understand. So similar to a fingerprint, no single human being is the same as one another. And so far, there's 76 different meta-program tendencies that have been studied and mapped, and they all, of course, have an impact on human behaviour. So we're just looking at three meta programs today that have an impact. So there's another 73 that have an equally different impact on people. So we're complex. We know it again intuitively, but we need to understand it theoretically. So the first model that I want to introduce is a game changer. I use this all the time to advocate for my own needs, and I use it all the time when I'm working with someone, either in a face-to-face context or I'm in a workshop. It's understanding how people learn and how they think about the information. So we'll explore a little bit more about what that all means. But first, I'd love to know, how did your mind create the cat? So again, how did your mind create the cat? Great, so yes, coming through. Great. So how did your mind create the cat? There's a few different options you can select there. And some of you are rightly going, why did she select a cat? Maybe she's a cat person. I'm a cat person. I'm a cat fan. I have two. Some felt, touched it. Great. You're watching the cat. You smelt the cat food. Fantastic. So this is a great example. And I mean, we can't do this in community engagement land. We can't just at the start of a workshop say, all those that see the cat stand in that corner, all those that hear the cat stand over here. We can't do that. But this gives you a sense of who in the room loosely uses a different style. So here we've got a few different maps. We've got the kinesthetic type that are playing with the cat. They're doing something a bit more tactile, or they felt the cat. Smelt, so that's a bit of a rare one, but it's another sense that people used. We've got a high portion of visual learners in the room. So they're watching the cat. So they imagine themselves watching the cat. We've got people here that wondered why I selected a cat or didn't understand the activity. And you'll see as we go through, they're likely to be auditory digital processes. So they typically require additional information and a combination of they take it into their brain and they pull it apart and tease it apart and figure out what to do with it. So as I explain, it'll be interesting to see how it resonates with you. Yeah, interesting, just a number of visual learners. So again, you've got this in your workbooks, and we're going to go through a few different things. The biggest things that I want you to recognize is there are these different types. So I'm a visual learner. So before I knew all this information, I would make sure I had the most fantastic looking renders. If I was working in an infrastructure project, I'd make sure my renders were fantastic. I'd make sure there was great diagrams, great maps, but I'd think about the information from the other perspectives because I would think in my modality. So the biggest thing that I want you to take away is the differences and the need to cater for all these different audiences. So visual learners, we've got it's obviously resonating with someone. The visual learner will use more tools to look at. So things like videos, images, etc. You can start to notice the language patterns. So I'll use the word I see. Oh, what does that look like? So I'll actually use my preferred modality. And likewise, so will people that are in the different categories. So for those of you that might be auditory digital, this person prefers working with more information and data. So they need to see lots of information before they can make a decision. They memorize by creating all learning steps, systems and procedures. And they can sometimes use words like sense, understand, think, process, perceive. they can usually handle larger amounts of volume or data. Not to say that we all can't do that, but it's just kind of their natural capacity. So they've got more, bit of the inquiring mind. Someone that's more kinesthetic, like we had the people that were feeling, feeling the fur or playing, they were more physical. So they'll use words like, I feel, I can't get a hold of that, I can't grasp that. Can you give me something concrete to work with? So even by listening to speech patterns in your audiences, so either through face-to-face engagement or online, you can start to see what that person needs, and you can start to pick up on those subtleties of preference. So recognising that quick activity that we did then is a very simple kind of tact in figuring out, maybe our main driver, our main modality. Most people have a combination of one or two. And it's not to say, again, that you can't tap into these other modalities. You're a visual learner and you can't read. That's not true. It's just that your preference to digest, or the way that you even think about something as you're reading a book, you'll create pictures in your mind. And that's the way we process it. So looking out for signs of different styles from you. So when you recognize someone's modality, consciously try to use words that represent their style. And obviously this is a bit easier when you're in person, because I can, talk to Christy and I can use her style that matches her. You can figure out the way that you might take them through information. So if it's a complex topic that you're explaining them with, an auditory digital learner might want to have all the facts and figures around that. They might want to know really what the basis of that decision is, and they'll need a bit more time to process it and review it. Someone that's a visual learner might want to have more of the renders or the pictures or the diagrams, kind of simply mapping out maybe a process. And if they're more of a kinesthetic learner, then you might need to actually show them or physically walk them through a space, or give them examples of what something might look like. So we, during COVID, we've been doing some videos. So we've been actually making some videos that take people in through a space that kind of captures a visual learner and probably more of a kinesthetic learner, while giving auditory over the top of it, so people can listen to what's being viewed. So just thinking more along those lines. And you can imagine if you've got someone that's in a different style, speaking to someone that's completely different, and neither of them are aware of their styles, then you're likely to create that disturbance in your communication, because you've got a different level of understanding. Game changer. As soon as you do that, and as soon as you start dropping, what it does is it relaxes an individual, because they feel like they're being understood. And we place a lot of value on being understood when we feel like the other person understands what we're talking about. So as practitioners, really powerful. The next one that I wanted to go into, and again, I know that we've done a very, very quick dash on that. Listen to your own language and observe other people's patterns would be probably the last thing on that. So the next element we want to look at is how people behave. And again, there are so many different models out there that look at how people's personalities impact on their behaviour, and we've selected this as a model. So the biggest thing to know is that personality is an easy concept for most of us to grasp, but sometimes we grasp it in the sense that it's fixated, that people are one way or the other, and they can change in circumstances. They normally normally revert to who they are if they're under pressure or they're tired, but they can expand into other areas. So someone that, as we look further at it, someone that has high levels of extroversion or high levels of extroversion may move towards introversion when they're tired, or introverts can extend into extroversion, but then they'll need to go back to recover. So personality is what makes you you. It encompasses all the traits, characteristics, and quirks that set you apart from everyone else. And again, according to researchers, personality is a coherent pattern of affect, cognition, and desire as they lead to behaviour. So it's a descriptor of how someone's is likely to behave. And for those of you that work in kind of face-to-face industries, community engagement or communications, you'll see the different types. When we start talking about them, you'll go, oh, that was, they've got high levels of extroversion or low levels of agreeableness. And so with personality having such a large impact on our lives, it's important that we have a reliable way to conceptualize it, because we're in the field, or we're in a workshop, or we're in a stressful situation where we need to get good at recognizing these different elements in people. So this is based on the OCEAN strategy. So you can see it's an acronym: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism. And all of them are a scale. So people can be in the middle, they can be far to the left, far to the right. So openness, and we'll go into more of these in detail, but openness is the highest a person exhibiting a high level of openness is likely to be very inventive or curious. So you might get those people that have come along to a workshop that say, well, this could be possible, or we could do this, or I've seen this in another area. So they're bringing in other experiences, or they're open to understanding. Someone that has a lower level of openness, they might be more cautious, reserved. So they might not have experienced much, they may not have travelled much, they may not be able to readily access new ideas. Similarly, conscientiousness, someone that's very efficient and organised. So the types of people that come along to a workshop, they have everything in their little folder. They've collected the notice that was sent in the mail. They've printed off council's documents, and they come in a neatly folder. To someone that says, I was walking past and I didn't know it was there. I just walked past, I saw the sign, I thought, fantastic, I'll come and give my view about this. So you've got the two different ends of the scale. You've got someone that's planned, someone that's easygoing and still participating. Extroversion, I'm sure you've probably experienced that enough. People that outgoing, energetic. Zoom's great because we can mute. In a face-to-face workshop, we can't mute these ones, and sometimes we probably let other people have a chance. And so we need to make sure our activities designed for both introverts and extroverts. So someone that prefers to think quietly and consider their response. Agreeableness is an interesting one. So someone that's quite open or friendly, compassionate, wants to get along, quite kind, able to put themselves in other situations. And on the other side of that, it might be someone that thinks about their own perspective first, is quite good at challenging other people, and can seem a bit detached from that personal element. So again, nothing wrong with them, just their style, just who they are. But you can see when you've got someone that's perhaps approaching it, myself as an extrovert, if I'm approaching someone that has got low levels of extroversion, I would need to temper or adjust my style. And likewise, being open and talking to someone that was cautious, I can't talk in my language pattern. So I can't say, this is going to be great, this development, you're going to love it, you're going to have this here, you're going to have that here, when they haven't experienced it, or they're going into it cautiously. So it's my job, this is my job, to work in their level. And neuroticism, again, not a condition, not a health condition. Someone that has is kind of low in neuroticism, sensitive, can be a bit nervous, very worried, a bit anxious. To someone that's more secure and confident. So might walk in, might feel a bit comfortable in sitting wherever, will participate in the activities, will find their own chair. Whereas someone that's a bit more nervous, combined with someone that has low levels of extroversion, is likely going to need some more hand holding, or someone to walk them through the process in a bit more detail. Now, this is an opportunity to do a little bit of a fish tank on a broad scale. And I'm wondering, I've got two people that are on my screen, who've been on my screen the whole time, which is lovely. But I've got Kirsten O'Connor-Smith. Hello. I'm wondering whether I could take you off mute and we could play a little game.
Sure, why not?
Fantastic.
Heads up, I might have some background noise
That's okay.
going.
So we're going to have a conversation, and I want the rest of the group to listen in and use the power of observation to kind of see what where Kirsten sits. So, do you want to talk to me? What's been the biggest challenge for you in changing your work practices around COVID?
Moving to online platforms, not having the face-to-face. That's been particularly challenging with non-English speaking community that I work with. You get so many cues from the body language, and that's been mostly removed, the way that we've had to communicate. There's been many challenges, but that's one, moving to the new platform.
What's been the biggest challenge? Has there been a concern for the children's welfare, or what's been the driver of your concern?
Ultimately, the family's well-being. So working in a school, my bottom line is it's all about the students, but my role is working with the families and trying to engage the community into, in various ways. So family well-being has been the biggest concern, and what can we do from afar that feels like, we're still trying to stay connected, but we're not having the face-to-face, and that's been a huge challenge.
And then probably the last question, so when you're imagining the families, what are you seeing in those family households in terms of the way they're coping with the school changes?
Just a lot of lack of understanding the processes, understanding their new role, understanding how to use the technology, everything else that's going on in the world of COVID, understanding how this changes things for them. I don't know, big question.
No, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing. And I've got two friends that are teachers, and I know that they struggle with how to actually do the right thing within this new system, how to protect families, how to continue the education, how to look after themselves. And I know you work in a really vulnerable community, and that would be very challenging. Thank you for sharing.
True.
Yeah, all those things. And could I have maybe another person? Is there another person that's willing to play? What about Rebecca? Rebecca Sachiro?
Hi.
Hi. So, hello. Are you comfortable? What's your what's your role?
So I'm a youth arts officer for Yarra City Council. I run a bunch of different art programs for young people, and I facilitate a support group for LGBTQIA plus young people as well. We've recently gone online with most of our programming, or sort of had to figure out how to do things better.
And what's been the biggest learning for you, or the biggest discovery?
I think I've had to sort of unpack my own agendas around productivity and what valuable outputs even look like with the young people that I work with. We can't really ask of them very much, and when I've actually listened to what they have to say to us, it's often around not having pressure on them and not having to, do activities that feel structured and feel like schoolwork when they're sort of, engaging in schooling at home. So we've had to sort of, really change our goalposts around what is success and what, outcomes look good this year.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. That's great. And how do you think your clients are working with it? How are they adjusting to it?
I think that the young people that I work with are extremely screen fatigued, and I think that they're just generally burnt out from schooling at home. So we've really just been trying to give them stuff that they can do in their own time that's away from a computer, in terms of different art like initiatives. I think that they've been enjoying some of it, but I'm also I'm not able to get that feedback from them all the time as well, because we can't be hounding them for information, and I'm not asking them to really give us back. For example, I made a series of activity book zines that have colouring in and different activities, and usually in the past I would get them to post them back to me, or I'd want to see the results of what they were doing, but we've just had to be comfortable with the fact that they're getting something out of them, and it's a nice thing to get in the mail or in a care package, but we might not necessarily be able to get it back. Yeah.
Wonderful. Again, just the amount of change that's needed at this time. And I think, once we get through this, and we keep hoping we get through that we'll have these resources and other ways of kind of reaching other communities, which I think particularly in some of our country or rural areas where transport's an issue, thinking other methodologies are going to be great that you're working with.
We're just giving them space and time and not pestering them has been important.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for playing. If everyone can give them a volunteers a virtual. So it's interesting. We've obviously got a few people on the route. How many people do we have? Have we got? I'm just wondering whether probably can't open it up for discussion. But my observations of the two. How many have we got? We've got too many for discussion. That's all right. Fair enough. That's fine. What we might do. So if I was to observe our two volunteers, you would have noticed different preferences from their modality. So I noticed, first of all, in, I think, your language, Rebecca. So you certainly talked a lot about think. And your eye plane is moving, your eye plane mostly moved in line with your ears, which suggests that you are an auditory learner. So you could be auditory digital, but you're most likely an auditory learner. And the way you described can't handle what they think, information. So you spoke in very kind of data, information-driven methods. Kirsten looked up quite a little bit. Didn't notice any language patterns, but I was trying to draw out in her language pattern by saying, what are you imagining seeing in your families? What are you noticing? I was wondering if she was painting a picture in her head around the chaos that she was experiencing. And I don't know if that's what you were doing or not, but I was trying to unpack what her modality was. Yours was a little bit unclear. And again, we'd have to spend more time kind of having those conversations, but I'd be starting to lean you in those directions. So I'd start to move Rebecca away from perhaps more visual elements and probably keep talking to her because she's going to respond the best. And then if we look at our scale, I mean, God, these two are just conscientious to the max. I mean, both of them probably leaning further across this way. Efficient, organised, trying different approaches. Rebecca started to talk about outcomes, measuring, checking in with families. So you've got this level of conscientiousness, which I then had to change my tone to. So I didn't change my tone as a practitioner enough for Kirsten. I was probably a little bit nervous. I was like, oh, the first one offline. So I was still at a higher energy than I needed to go, but I was better at matching Rebecca. And you might notice that even when you watch the replay, I came in a bit too hard with Kirsten in my energy. So my extroversion was a bit too high for where Kirsten was sitting. So she came in more around here, and I hit her with my woo. And you may have felt that, or you may not have. But with Rebecca, I was able to meet her because her extroversion was probably more somewhere in the middle. So you would have noticed that Rebecca had a higher level of extroversion. Probably in terms of openness, I'd say this is maybe our two separated slightly. I'd say that, and this again, it could be a factor of age, it could be a factor of experience, it could be a factor of where you're working with, but I'd say that Kirsten felt like there was a bit more cautiousness in the way that she was approaching what she was doing, whereas Rebecca certainly felt a bit more lighter. She was trying things out, she was creating these worksheets, she was putting things out there. And again, that's probably the nature of your roles. You've got to meet an academic syllabus, and you're really providing a support system to keep them kind of engaged. So there was probably this for me probably felt like there was the biggest difference in this. Both extremely conscientious. Agreeableness, my God, the two of them are off the scales in terms of friendly and compassion. I mean, you could just hear it in their voices, the amount of care that they have for their clients. So again, we can use that as practitioners to start to talk to that language, knowing that that's what drives these two. So an example of that might be, we're talking about a project, development of a community facility. So we might start talking more to the human element. So what type of users might experiencing that? What type of programs or services could we provide? What would be the expected outcomes to the community? Whereas if you've got someone that's perhaps is more about the look or the style or what council's spending, they're going to be most likely more on the kind of the facts and figures and less on the human side, combined depending on how they are. Didn't get a sense of neuroticism. I think we're all a bit fatigued, so I'd say we're probably all somewhere in the middle. Yep, you're not neurotic. So Kirsten, wipe her brow. So in your notes, you've got a lot more detail about this. But again, you can just start to see the different personalities. So again, we've got two different people, two different roles that are approaching those roles from very different bases. Feel free to, I know we're monitoring the chat. So again, we've got some more slides that we'll share with you through the group. But openness to experience can be described as depth and complexity of an individual's mental life and experiences. So common traits for that are imagination, insightfulness, varied interest, originality, daringness, preference for variety, cleverness, curiosity, perceptive intellect. So that kind of just trying things out, seeing what they're like, bringing in other examples. Conscientiousness, so you can hear that in both of their voices: persistence, ambition, thoroughness, self-discipline, predictability, control, reliability, resourcefulness, hard work. I mean, you could hear in their voices and by what they were demonstrating in terms of their workflow, they were being in contact with parents, they were working with kids to create guides, but not being giving too much pressure on them. But you could hear the kind of the perseverance and their energy for their work. Extroversion. So again, we might see this play out more in a situation where we're not in front of our computers, but talkiveness, merriness, outgoing nature, fun-loving, tendency for affection, friendliness, and social confidence. So, both of them, I mean, Kirsten and I, both of them I picked on, but they didn't suddenly turn off their cameras and exit. And so knew initially when they first started talking that they were willing to be experiment with us. Agreeableness, so altruism, trust, modesty, humbleness, patience, tact, politeness, kindness, loyalty, and consideration. So all of these elements kind of talk to how well people get along with others. So again, someone that's high in agreeableness and low in agreeableness, they're not going to understand the same benefit of doing things like a group work in a workshop, because one naturally wants to be a part of a group and wants to work within the common good, or within that kind of that social feeling, where one might be there for a different experience. They might be there to understand more about council's processes, or making sure that they uphold what the broader community wants. So we just need to always, as practitioners, try to balance this out with our activities, with the way we interact. And again, neuroticism, it's not a factor of meanness or incompetence, but it's confidence of someone being in their own skin. So it can determine things like their level of awkwardness, moodiness, jealousy, testiness, fear, anxiety, timidness, wariness of a process, self-criticism, lack of confidence. So it can be things that have an external focus or have an internal focus. And, it's really helpful to know this, because someone that's really, highly anxious about a process and is asking us lots of questions, it isn't about us. It isn't about them not trusting a process. It's about them making sure that they feel comfortable. So it's actually really interesting frame in thinking about these perspectives from. The last activity that I wanted to talk to is breaking state. So breaking state is one way that we can shift participants. So a break in state is a sudden change in speech or movement that can change a person's state quickly. And it allows people to move one state and then enter into a natural state. It can also allow someone that is deep diving into their perhaps emotional needs or their personality needs to maybe switch out of that, because we often want people to move into a space where they're able to think about the future or think about something from a different angle. So in an engagement context, breaking state can be used to transition from where we might be discussing problems or challenges to having a more creative, future-focused question. So we did a couple of things today. We had the music. So again, the music is a grounding experience, shifts you out of where you've come from. You might have been in a lunch break, you've changed and come along to this session. So we're kind of encouraging you to leave the day behind. Now we've gone from something that's a bit heavy to a bit lighter. So I'm trying to do that with a silly hat. So again, just trying to switch it out. And you can do that too by, on a video call. Does someone have their sound on and it interrupts? That may not be the case, but it could be an easy way of just shifting people's perspective so that they stop what they're doing. If you want people to unravel from a kind of a repetitive thought that they're having or a repetitive situation that's no longer useful, then you might want to break that state. I'm just thinking whether we stop there for some questions.
Thanks, Cindy. That was really, really interesting. And from a personal experience, we went through the exercise yesterday, and I found it really insightful because, like, knowing what changes can be made that makes it helpful, or those sorts of things, was really useful from my own learning experience. So I'm sure others have had the same experience today. There's a couple of questions in the chat box that we can refer to. And then if anybody else has any other questions, please just feel free to pop them in the chat box as well. But the first one's from Julie, and it says, do you have some go-to questions that you use regularly to help get a sense of where people are at?
Yeah, it depends on what your engagement question is. So I would start with if you're talking from an engagement perspective, I would ask that question and then see where people go. I just use see, because that's going to give you the biggest indication as to where to direct the information. So, for example, the question might be, what challenges do you see with this project? And someone that is, I'm just going to go to this one in particular. Someone that has an openness, has a high level of openness probably won't even be able to access challenges. So if you ask, what do you think the challenges are with this project? They're going to go, oh, I don't think there's any challenges, actually. I think it's really good. I think it's going to be fantastic for our community because we're going to get X, Y, Z. So people that are in really high on one side won't be able to answer a question that assumes that level of resistance. Similarly, if you ask people, what are the benefits of this project? I don't think there are any benefits. So it's really not one question. It's a kind of a combination of just seeing where they where people fall, and noticing their behaviour. So if someone comes in, as I mentioned, into your space where they've got a workbook and a folder, everything prepared, or they talk about outcomes, you know, this person is conscientious. And so I can sometimes be a bit over here. So if I'm talking to someone that's conscientious, has high levels of conscientiousness, I need to make sure I have all the facts and figures, or I have a technical expert that can help me. I'm thinking about, we did a transport plan, and we had a couple of very engaged transport community members that were interested in transport. Now, I know I don't have the level of detail to match that individual. So that's when I allow that person to have a half an hour conversation with a technical expert, because my lack of understanding is going to create concern for the conscientious individual in that particular subject matter. Sorry, there's not just an easy ask this.
Thanks, Cindy. That's great. And there's another question there from another Kathleen. And she says, what suggestions do you have for engaging or hearing from those who are challenging or detached?
Yeah, great question. Probably not large scale events where they have to be put in a situation where they don't necessarily feel comfortable. So there would be a method selection for me. It would be tapping into perhaps your community leaders. So if you know that perhaps the group that you're trying to reach is a vulnerable community or culturally diverse community, I would go in through the leaders. So going through a trusted source, like a church or a refuge or a women's group, and allow them to speak in that manner, because something that is big and anonymous like this is going to create a situation where they come across as a negative person, because you can imagine they might be a little bit aloof, they're detached from all the feely work, or an individual interview. And then it's probably about our own ego. I certainly struggle in this space because I come from a high level of agreeableness, where if I'm speaking with someone that doesn't necessarily exhibit the traits that I'm feeling, I find it difficult sometimes to draw them out. So again, that's where it's great playing to the strengths of people that are in your team. So if you've got someone that has that you could identify as being that type, that might be more facts and figures driven, might be the one in the team meeting that's kind of challenging the status quo and questioning things, like then they might be the best person to speak to as well, if you can't feel as if you can do that. But again, probably avoiding kind of these mass situations, because I'm not going to be there.
Thanks, Cindy. That's really great. We've just got, how about we do one more question, and then it's probably give enough time to move to the next sessions. So we've just got a question that says, pardon?
Can read that one. How do you change the method to meet someone else if you're very different? It's a matter of practice, absolutely. It's a matter of being. I often say with this one, with my extroversion, I know that I need to put down my antennas, because if I come at a situation with all my extroversion, and I'm quite tall as well, then it's a double whammy. I have to be who that other person needs me to be. And you know, if it's about allowing myself to dance at the start, so I get out a bit of my extroversion energy, and likewise for someone else, it's about being who you need to be in that moment and then doing what you need to do to recover, because we can all operate on these levels, but we'll want to go back to our other level. Yeah, got to learn to be chameleons. Absolutely. Well, it's our job. It's our job to create, again, coming back to creating and holding space for people. It's our job to do that. And we need to be who they need us to be. Otherwise, we're going to get very reactionary work. Or if I come at someone that with my extroversion and they're an introvert, like they'll go, I'll take this away and read it. Like I will overshadow their experience. That's just an easy one, because I know that's one that I physically have to remind myself of, or do something to move myself.
Thanks, Cindy.
Yeah, fantastic. So the last thing, I think we had a few more slides that we took out 10 slides. If you are interested, we'd love to send them to you, so you can scan and leave your email, and we'll get in touch with you as well if you're interested.
And if you want to just keep that up on the screen, and I can share the links in the chat to the Facebook group, as well as to the Kupia newsletter. And the Kupia newsletter will be where all of the presentations throughout the conference will be shared through. And the Facebook is, that place where you can go have a cup of tea and have a conversation with the other attendees and continue the conversations from today.
Yeah, and I think that's great. We'll be in there answering questions as well. So if you have questions, which I'm sure you do, but again, just be curious with it. It's something that you won't change overnight. And I've been doing it for 3 years, and then I still find myself in my thing with Kristen going, oh, I went into extrovert. So again, it's self-awareness and practice.
On that note, thank you all for coming today, and we look forward to working or meeting with you on the Facebook chat in days to come. So thanks for everyone coming, and I'll let you get to your next conference session or back to your work day.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you later.
Thanks very much.